All right, you ready?
Yep.
All right. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome back to the Gold Mine. It's a very special week. Sam Goldfarb here with Ryan Eisner. Joe Kane is currently driving back from Louisiana. Um, so he could not be here with us. So it's just going to be Ryan and I. We're going to be talking college basketball the whole night. It's a college basketball Final Four special, and we'll have a lot of off-season updates as well, transfer portal, some coaching moves we have to talk about too. So we've got a packed agenda, Ryan. And we're going to start just right off the bat. We're going to hop in and talk about what happened last weekend. Sweet 16 and Elite 8. Obviously, we have our Final Four. It's set. You've got Gonzaga playing UCLA in the later game tomorrow night. And then the earlier game, you've got Houston playing Baylor. So a really eventful weekend. But we have to start and recap everything that's gone down first. So, Gonzaga, number 1 overall seed. We thought maybe we didn't think Creighton would give them a problem, and they didn't. Let's be honest. That Creighton team looked like they wanted to play at an insanely fast pace. Gonzaga's totally cool with that. Didn't give them a problem. Then they run into USC, a team that averaged, I think, a 21-point win margin or margin of victory for the first 3 games. Gonzaga mopped the floor with them. The first half, completely dominant. The second half, well, USC had some intriguing moments, but they never really were.
The most intriguing moment of that game was when USC got it within 13 and you thought maybe. What's funny is normally it works the other way around with schools from conferences like the West Coast Conference, but in this case, nobody in the Pac-12 will prepare USC for playing Gonzaga, and it showed. Like, you don't see a team like Gonzaga – well, really anywhere else, because there is no other team like Gonzaga in the country. And this was probably for the post-championship show, but Gonzaga, if they win the championship, in my opinion, they will be the greatest. I think they're the greatest college basketball team I've ever seen. If they win the championship, I think we can start talking about them in historic conversations, as in, are they one of the best ever?
I think they'll absolutely be in that conversation. Obviously, there's a long way to go, but they control things this weekend, Ryan. And I guess the first thing I want to ask is, coming into the tournament, we knew they were pretty damn good. Like, we knew they were really, really good. But there were still a few concerns about maybe how they handle opponents they're supposed to beat, blah, blah, blah. Ryan, do you think they're even better than we expected coming in?
I don't know. That's pretty hard to be even better than what we expected, because as you said, we already knew they were pretty damn good. So, but yes, I think they've exceeded even everyone's expectations with the way they're just breezing through. I mean, sure, Oklahoma for a little bit was kind of close, but I mean, they've just, and UCLA I don't think is going to keep them close either, although that's an all-time coaching job by Mick Cronin right there. To get them this far, but Gonzaga is just a whole nother animal. They're on a whole nother planet from even Michigan.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm thinking here. Like, I think the concern coming in about Gonzaga was, can they put teams away? Can they stay locked in? Can they not go down 15 points in the first half to open the game? I think they have put away every concern we've had about them thus far. And I think that's why I asked this question.
It was never, can they put teams away? Because they have the talent to. It's, would they be focused?
Yes.
There were games in the West Coast Conference this year where Gonzaga looked bored and they didn't look focused, and that was the concern. They can beat anybody by 20, 30 points because they're just that talented. But in the regular season, sometimes they weren't always focused, and they weren't always playing with that extreme attention to detail on defense that has come to be one of their strongest points as a unit this year. And so that's where maybe some of those concerns came from.
Yeah, and so that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, I think they've definitely been more locked in and focused. It's clearly shown throughout the tournament. And obviously, look, against Creighton and USC, they were borderline impeccable. Like, I thought Drew Timme obviously fueled them through a lot of that. Suggs was terrific in the second half. So I want to ask Ryan, kind of segueing about Gonzaga, but who do you think, and we talk about Suggs, we talk about Timme, obviously Kispert's in there as well, but maybe hasn't had the tournament people expected coming in. He hasn't been bad. He just hasn't had the numbers that the likes of Suggs and Timme have had consistently. So I want to ask, who has been the best player on this Gonzaga roster for you in the first 4 games of this tournament?
I would have to go Drew Timme. I just don't think I just don't think he's been guardable. He's been extremely unguardable in the post all tournament long. Find me a guy that can stop him. I'll sit here and wait for a long time while you do that because Drew Timmy's just a monster. He's really been the key for Gonzaga, although Jalen Suggs has been mighty impressive as well.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I was texting my dad about this during the USC game. Drew Timme coming into the season, we talked about Gonzaga and we said, this team's going to be good. We know it. The guards, they have surefire pieces. The question was always the front court. And it's weird saying that now, but Timme came off the bench last year, was more of a role player, put up decent numbers for a freshman, but nothing crazy. The questions were about him. He has blown all of those out of the water. I think in this tournament, objectively, he's been the best player on that Gonzaga team. The way he bullied Evan Mobley in the post on Tuesday night was scary. Like
that
it was
scary.
Like, and we've talked about Mobley on this show before. We talked about him when we analyzed his draft prospects. His size, yes, he's thin. He can get pushed around, but Drew Timme isn't the biggest kind of most muscular dude. He's well built, but he's not like Shaq.
And Evan and the Mobley brothers are two of the best interior defenders in the country, and Mobley and Timme just brushed them aside.
Yeah, and there were always concerns about Mobley's size, but it's not in terms of like strength muscularly. But Timme isn't that much bigger than him and absolutely manhandled him. I don't even think he got one shot swatted. And Evan Mobley's one of the best shot blockers in the nation. So that's a huge thing. I think Drew Timme, I think we're both in agreement on this, but I think he's been the most unstoppable player on this roster. Yes, Suggs has been brilliant. Yes, Kispert's had his moments, but Drew Timme has been the most efficient. He's been the most well-rounded, and he's been so good on offense. It's ridiculous. All right, Ryan. Final question here about Gonzaga before we kind of segue into what I believe is the East region. Can anyone slow this offense down left? Is there anybody left in the tournament on the other side of the bracket you think that could actually slow Gonzaga's offense?
I think Baylor, if they play pre-COVID pause defense, I think could slow them down a little bit. But Baylor, I think, is the only team left in the field that has any shot at Gonzaga.
Yeah, I think Houston wouldn't be able to score enough regardless.
I don't think so either.
I do agree with you on Baylor. I think that they've been way better defensively in the tournament, but they have flashed a lot of defensive lapses. We're going to talk about this later, but against Arkansas, it was a bit up and down. I think they can. I just don't know if they will. I think that's kind of my basic analysis.
Yeah.
All right, Ryan. East region. She just moved to LA.
Go to UCLA, and she drives a Maserati.
And she got a body, and UCLA's partying because they're in the Final Four, and they upset number 1 Michigan. Good segue, Sam. But I had to quote it. But UCLA, the Cinderella, well and truly established. We thought Michigan State, the team they played in the first 4, would potentially be that. UCLA says, how dare you pick against us?
Just your typical Cinderella with 11 national championships. No big deal.
It's not a huge deal, but it's very funny. This is a UCLA team that's kind of been in the dumps lately. It's good to see them back in the final stages of the big dance. It's clearly the farthest they've been for a long time, since Kevin Love and Russell Westbrook were in college. So to put
where they also lost to a 1 seed from a mid-major conference when they got crushed by Derrick Rose Memphis.
Don't bring me pain. I'm a Bulls fan. All right. But UCLA, obviously, they storm into the Final Four. They survive Alabama in a crazy overtime game. By the way, you didn't foul up 3. That's a whole different issue, but you get bailed out anyway. I'm sure they didn't expect Alex Reese to make a 30-foot 3, given his 29% three-point percentage on the year, or 27 or whatever it was. But they beat Alabama, and then they win an absolute grinder slugfest against Michigan in the Elite Eight. We talked about this actually earlier in the week when we were hanging out, and Michigan's offense obviously had a lot of flaws. You didn't have Livers as the safety net, and that was kind of what did it in for them. But Johnny Juzang had 28 of their 51 points. It was absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, but Gonzaga, the problem with that is Gonzaga scores 51 points in a half.
Yeah.
Like, you see, 51 points is not going to be nearly enough against Gonzaga. They're going to have to score almost twice that.
Absolutely.
They won't even have any chance.
Absolutely. I'm fully with you there. And I guess, and kind of going along offensive concerns here. Their best offensive player from that game, Johnny Juzang, has had recurring ankle issues throughout the tournament. It looked pretty bad, low key, in the second half of that Michigan game. He played through it. He hit one or two big shots late, but he didn't look the same before he got hurt. And yes, he's had some time off to get treatment and everything. But I want to ask you, Ryan, how concerned are you about Johnny Juzang? Not to play. We all know he's going to play. But in terms of being able to perform at the level he has throughout the tournament?
I'm very concerned. I'm not sure he'll be able to, and I think this puts a lot of pressure on Jaime Jaquez and Tiger Campbell to really carry the load for UCLA. And those two are good players in their own rights, but I'm just not sure they're that guy. I'm not sure they'll be able to do that. I think they need Johnny Juzang to be at or near 100% because their only chance in this game, in my opinion, is for Johnny Juzang to go off.
I absolutely agree with you.
That's their only chance. They need Johnny Juzang to make special, elite kind of playmaker type plays, and they need him to just go off if they want to even keep the game close.
I agree. I think they not only need Juzang to go off, I think they need Jaquez to have a Michigan State caliber performance, if I'm being honest. Like this is going to take all their studs clicking at once. You saw that a little bit.
If Tiger Campbell decided to show up too.
True. I mean, Tiger Campbell. Actually, I want to give Tiger Campbell his props because in the Michigan game, he had a few big shots down the stretch, like huge mid-range jump shots. And I got to give him his props. But you're right, the inconsistency there, at least scoring-wise, is always going to be relevant.
Yeah, that's been a problem for them all year. Really, inconsistent scoring. It's kind of why they were in the position they were in going into the tournament as an 11 seed in the playing game.
Absolutely. And so for me, that's kind of my concern. I agree with you. I'm worried about Juzang. I'm not fully certain how the ankle will hold up throughout the game, but two, even how it'll be coming in. I know he'll play regardless of what happens. They'll give him a painkiller if they have to. He's going to play, but it hasn't looked good. He's kept re-injuring it. Whenever he lands awkwardly on it, UCLA fans are holding their breath. And to factor that in, you're playing the best team in the country, playing its best basketball of the year, arguably. It's undefeated as well. It's not a recipe for victory. And I guess the follow-up question to that is, look, despite all of these obstacles, I mean, UCLA is an 11 seed. They have to play in the first four. Johnny Juzang's been banged up all tournament. They've had on and off games from Jaquez. Jaquez has had two really, really good games, but he's also been a bit up and down. So the other question I have to ask here, Ryan, is how have they gotten this far despite all this adversity? What is your basic analysis of this? Because if you look at the roster, yeah, it's talented, but it doesn't look like a Final Four roster.
Well, the way they've gotten this far is two things to me: defense and just sheer toughness. Their defense has been, for the most part, superb. Ever since halftime of the Michigan State game, their defense really took it up a notch, and it has been superb. Holding Michigan, even without Isaiah Livers, to 49 points is an amazing defense accomplishment. And they've just been the tougher team in all their games. When Michigan State had that meltdown at halftime, UCLA came out of the locker room and took it right to them. BYU, they took it right to BYU from the jump. Abilene Christian, they had a 16-0 run or something at one point and really imposed their will. Alabama, this was what impressed me the most in terms of toughness. Alex Reese hits the buzzer-beating three. And most of us are probably all thinking, that's it, Alabama's going to win. UCLA storms out in overtime and takes a quick early lead and pulls that out. That's a toughness thing. And then they just were tougher than Michigan when it counted. So defense and toughness have been what's been the key for UCLA getting this far.
And this is also, keep in mind, the Alabama game, Johnny Juzang fouled out. He had a rough game. He did not play well for his standards and fouled out late in the second half, and they still win that basketball game on the back of Jaquez and a few other guys. We have to give credit to Mick Cronin here. I think his game plan for Michigan specifically was absolutely incredible.
I agree.
Down the stretch, they kept Michigan out of the lane. They forced them to take contested threes. Franz Wagner airballed one late. Mike Smith got a decent look at the end of the game.
Michigan didn't really try to get better shots. Their late game offense was pretty poor.
Absolutely. And that gets exposed because Isaiah Livers, who's your safety net, isn't on the floor. Franz Wagner had kind of a rocky tournament the whole time. Mike Smith was up and down. And I think late UCLA really took advantage of that. So I have to give credit to Cronin. Also, maybe that's a comment on Michigan's offensive shot selection. But look, I mean, this team has shown so much versatility. I love your point about toughness too, because they haven't won all these games in the 50s. Like, you'll see the Michigan score and you'll think, oh, they won defensive slugfests. No, they actually ran the score up on pretty much every other team they played. And they beat Alabama, arguably one of the best offenses in the country, at their own game. They beat them 88-78. Like, they're playing at Bama's pace, at their speed, and they're winning that basketball game. I think that that's a phenomenal point. I think that touches on the toughness you're talking about, and we have to give UCLA credit. Like, it's a perfect combination of you got good players, you've got great coaching, and you've also just got phenomenal versatility and toughness. And so along those lines, look, I'd say if you look on paper, they're probably the most flawed Final Four team left. Yeah, maybe you make a case for Houston and their shooting, but on paper, it's UCLA. And there are big issues in the front court, right? Cody Riley's been in and out of foul trouble the whole tournament. And Nwuba, not impressed by him in the slightest. They were just getting every mismatch they wanted on him, Michigan was, and exploited him. I'm surprised they didn't play Clark a little more. Maybe they just didn't like the matchup there. Maybe he had foul trouble. Maybe he was even banged up. I'm not fully certain on that. But UCLA in the front court objectively has its issues. It's not a big team. Yes, Jaquez is decent size for stretch four, and Juzang is a decent size for a guard, but they aren't rocking with 6'10", 6'11" guys out twin tower type sets. So I want to know, Ryan, against a Gonzaga team that has Drew Timme, who's pretty considerably tall, they bring Ballo off the bench. Kispert's a tough stretch four that maybe matches up okay with Juzang in that sense, but I'm curious how you think they're going to be able to bang on the glass with the likes of Gonzaga, and if they potentially were to pull off the upset of the year, the likes of, say, a Houston team or a Baylor team.
Here's the problem. I don't think they're going to be able to compete on the glass with Gonzaga. I think it's going to be a mismatch, and it's one of the reasons why I think the game itself will be lopsided.
Absolutely.
I think Timmy's going to have his way inside. I think Gonzaga's going to have their way on the offensive and defensive boards. I'm really not sure how UCLA is just going to need to have it's going to need to be like Villanova, Georgetown in 85. They're going to need to have a near perfect game. And that's just to have a chance. This is an extreme mismatch. There's a reason it's one of the biggest Vegas point spreads in Final Four history, with Gonzaga at a 14.5 last I looked. There's a valid reason for that.
Yeah, and honestly, if I'm a betting man, I'm taking Gonzaga.
I'm taking Gonzaga to cover that.
Like, I mean, the way, look, they just banked with Evan Mobley and Isaiah Mobley and might have even won the rebounding battle. I'm not worried about them winning against a Cody Riley who's 6'9" and no depth in that front whatsoever. Also, look, if Nwuba's in that game, I'm getting Corey Kispert switches every minute, like, if I can. I think that there is a lot to be kind of disenthused by if you're a UCLA fan, and it's not going to bode well on the glass. And so transitioning, talk about UCLA. We move to the South region. We've got a few topics we need to talk about here. First, the original Cinderella. The Cinderella we thought would be our Cinderella, Oral Roberts, the 15 seed, made it to the Sweet 16, fell to Arkansas. EISNER got a phenomenal look, really poor defense on that last play. Credit to Arkansas. They battled back from a double-digit deficit to get back in the game and win. But Ryan, here's the big question I want to ask. Max Abmas, obviously we've heard the hype. We've seen this man play. He's a phenomenal player. You could argue O'Banner was just as good, but towards the end of the tournament, it was clear who the alpha was, obviously. Against Arkansas, O'Banner struggled, and, I mean, Abmas was Abmas. So I got a question about his NBA prospects and if you think that – how you think it'll unfold. So the first thing I want to ask is, do you think that Abmas is a legitimate NBA prospect? And two, if so, do you think he should leave this year? Because I don't believe it was his last year of eligibility.
Yes, I believe Max Abmas is a legitimate NBA prospect. Not sure he's first round, but second round I could be convinced. And because in this day and age, good shooters are a very valuable commodity. And Abmas is a clutch, big-time shot maker for Star, among other things. But Should he leave? It's a tough question. Um, I would say I think he should stay at Oral Roberts for another year, maybe even try and move into that first round because I'm not really sure he's first round material right now. Um, and if he and O'Banner go back and they stay healthy and they play like this, they play the way they did in the tournament next year, Oral Roberts could have a really special season.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Asmus is a legit NBA player. The case for going is that I just don't see how another year in college is really going to change anything from a prospect standpoint. He led the nation in scoring. Maybe you improve your defense a bit, but he's undersized and he's going to get targeted because of that. Maybe you improve lateral quickness or your ability to pop in passing lanes, but I just there isn't a lot left for him to improve in college. But also, I think you're right. I think this year's draft is probably a little deeper than next year's from what it seems at the surface, at least. And also, with his size concerns, with him just bursting onto the scene, maybe you give him another year to have the spotlight. Maybe it's like Steph Curry with us. And so something along those lines.
Yeah. And I actually had been thinking that Max Asmus's tournament run was very similar to Steph Curry's at Davidson in 2008. The problem, I think, what could hurt Asmus is if he goes back. The other reason that I think he should go back is to prove that because not a lot of people saw him until the tournament. So I think it's now he's on people's radar.
Absolutely.
But I think it's fair to suggest he should go back to prove that tournament wasn't a fluke.
And I think that that's kind of my point as well. Like when you sit here, people know how good he is. Like college basketball experts, they've seen the stats. They recognize he's been tearing teams up all year. But with the spotlight Oral Roberts would have with him coming back, he would have a full year to prove it night in, night out. I think that's the big selling point for me if I'm Asmus. Also, maybe next year's draft isn't as deep. It's not as tough to break into the top 30. So there's that as well. All right, Ryan. Next thing we want to talk about here in the South region, the Muss Bus finally came to a screeching halt on I believe it was Tuesday night or Monday night, excuse me, and they folded Baylor. It was a game that Baylor had controlled the whole way, but Arkansas made some intriguing pushes throughout the night. By the 4-minute mark, though, it was really out of reach. So with Justin Smith, Moses Moody, Jalen Tate all likely leaving at the end of this year, I want to know, where does the Muss Bus go from here? What are their prospects for next year? Because it's not looking great, but Eric Musselman is such an expert transfer manager that you should see him bring in some more pieces before the end of April or May.
Yeah. All in all, this was an overachieving year for Eric Musselman and the Muss Bus. They were picked 6 in the SEC. They got a 3 seed, and made the Elite 8. Really good year there. As for next year, I would agree that their prospects look a little bleak, and I'm going to release way too early rankings as soon as the championship game ends because why not? Never too early. But here's the thing. It is worth considering that in this day and age with the transfer portal that those things are very fluid and subject to change, and we won't really get a true idea of next year's rosters until June or July. But for Arkansas, I would expect them to add. I would certainly expect them to get somebody. Eric Musselman has been very busy, as I understand it already, hitting up players on the transfer portal. And so I'm sure he'll get somebody. Now, do I think they'll have this type of year next year? Probably not. I think I think they're still a tournament team next year, but I think they take a slight step back and they're more closer towards that 7-8 seed range.
Yeah, and they're going to need Note to become a little more efficient if they don't bring in a co-star for him, and that's the concern. I think I'm with you. Eric Musselman, wherever he's gone, has always fixed his roster through transfers. I don't think that's going to change. I mean, obviously, he comes into Arkansas, gets Justin Smith from Indiana, it's a huge ad. And Smith, obviously, I mean, you know how high I was on him. I think that the consistent scoring and consistent defense that you're losing. You lose your leading scorer in Moody. You lose Tate, who was arguably better than Moody throughout the tournament. You lose Smith, who was arguably the best scorer in those 4 games they played, and huge on the glass and huge defensively. So there's just going to be issues there. But yeah, I do think that Arkansas will be able to at least reload to the point that they're a tournament squad, and we'll just see where it goes and who Eric Musselman manages to snag in from the portal. And kind of flipping gears here to the team in the Final Four, actually, from the South, Baylor. Obviously, they make the Final Four. It's not as easy as people expected. Yeah, the first 2 weekends were pretty smooth, but it was a bit rocky in spurts against Villanova. They were down at halftime against Arkansas. It was a bit up and down. They look good at the end of games and they close things out, but they didn't necessarily look the most consistent. So I just want to know from you, Ryan, what you saw on that front, if you kind of agree with that, and do you really think that Baylor is good enough to win this tournament still, with Gonzaga still sitting on the other side of the bracket?
I think Baylor is talented enough to win this tournament, but I don't think the way they've been playing is good enough. I think the way they've been playing, they could actually lose to Houston because they have these spurts and against where they just don't look that good, and against inferior competition or against teams like Villanova or Arkansas, they're able to recover from that. But Houston is a very good basketball team that will make them pay for those kind of stretches of bad basketball. And it does look at times like Baylor has been sleepwalking through some of these games, and they can't do that now.
Fully agree with you. And also the big weakness for Baylor is the defensive glass. And you throw the size of Houston, Bryson Gresham, Gore,
very good offensive rebounding team.
I mean, the reason Houston's best offense is a missed shot, arguably.
Yeah, it is.
And you're throwing them in the mix with Twama Thachua and Flo Thamba, but guys who are energizers but aren't big rebounders, and especially in the defensive glass. And I think you throw Gorham, Gresham in there, things could get interesting. So, yeah, I think Houston absolutely could give them fits. Then if they get through Houston, assuming Gonzaga takes care of business, you got Drew Timme to worry about, which isn't much easier. So I'm with you there. I'm a little worried about Baylor. I think that they should beat Houston, but it's not a guarantee. All right, Ryan. And the final region, speaking of Houston, they're partying like it's 1984. It's kind of wild. It's kind of wild. That was a long time ago, but the Cougars are back. They're back. They're back. Phi Slam. This is probably the best team they've had since Phi Slam.
Yeah, Houston's back before Texas football.
Yeah, Houston's back before Texas basketball as well.
Chris Beard, though. Chris Beard.
We'll talk about that later. Joe, that was for you. But Houston, obviously, they've had the easiest road to the Final Four by far. I mean, look, they beat Cleveland State. If they had even struggled with them, that'd be disgraceful. Look, Cleveland State's a good program, but with the way Houston has been built all year, that shouldn't be an issue. They barely beat Rutgers, which is a bit concerning. Then they beat a Syracuse team that kind of ran out of its Cinderella mojo, and then beat a 12 seed in Oregon State, not before almost blowing an 18-point lead. So I want to get your opinion on this, about them having the easiest road to the Final Four ever, and talk about if you see any skills that you think will confidently translate against a Baylor team that is considerably better than anyone they play.
I think we touched on it with offensive rebounding. I think that's their best chance against Baylor, is to dominate the offensive glass the way they did against Oregon State and Syracuse in particular, and they definitely did against Rutgers as well. I mean, as for their path, there's not much they can do about it, except for just beat the teams that are in front of them. So a Final Four is a Final Four no matter how you get there. They're here. Now they're going to have to definitely step up their game a notch, though. They played the way they did against Rutgers, or the way they did in the stretch against Oregon State, where Oregon State came back, and they're going to get ran out of the gym. So Kelvin Sampson has his work cut out for him, because the Cougs need to play a lot better, and they need to play a much more complete game against Baylor.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, for me, their defense has been great. Like, I think their defense is going to be able to keep them in the game, and their offensive rebounding might be. But to win and get over the edge, they're going to have to be way more efficient. This Houston team is not known for its efficiency. Yes, they have Quentin Grimes, who's phenomenal. They got Sasser. They got Mark. They got some guys who can score. and Giroux as well, who's an all-around guy. But the big issue with them is none of those guys are known for being the most efficient on the planet, especially Grimes. And he's a phenomenal scorer, but he can definitely go cold. And so for me, it's not just going to be about whether they can win the glass battle. I think we know they're probably going to do that, and they're probably going to be defensively sound. But can they score enough to keep up and score efficiently enough to stay in the game? Maybe try to slow the pace down a little more as well. That's the big difference maker for me. I think the big skill that we've talked about is the offensive rebounding and the defense. Those will translate. But other than that, you need to be a big-time shot maker throughout the night if you're going to beat Baylor.
And I don't think Houston has those.
I don't either. I think Grimes is phenomenally talented and he gets buckets, but I don't know if he's going to really be that dude. And I guess that's the big concern that we're going to talk about in a second. But before we do and break down all the Final Four games for you, in the moment everyone's been waiting for, it seems, who's your MOP of the tournament? We're recapping all these 4 games, these 4 sets of games that have gone down. Who is your MOP right now?
My most outstanding player of the tournament right now has to be Drew Timme. The way he's just been an unstoppable force for Gonzaga makes him a fairly easy choice at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really disagree with you. I think the only really alternative choice somebody could make is probably going to be comment from the Ball Fake podcast will address shortly, but in my opinion, maybe you can make a case for Juzang. I think Juzang's been the big reason UCLA's kind of stayed competitive and locked in. I think there's no one guy I can point to on Baylor who's been like, oh yeah, like he's been great throughout all 4 games. There have been Baylor guys that have been solid, but there hasn't been a Baylor guy that's really stuck out to me. And we know Houston, I don't think they're going to get that recognition. So for me, I agree with you on Timme. If you want an alternative, I'm picking Juzang. And we get a comment from the Ball Fake podcast. He says, I think Grimes could really be shut out of this one. He struggles to blow by average defenders. Curious how he's matched up against these hard-nosed Baylor guards. And they'll probably put Davion Mitchell on him.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a struggle for Quentin Grimes. Davion Mitchell is a really tough defender.
Defensive player of the year today.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think Quentin Grimes is really going to struggle.
I mean, yeah, he's struggled in general, just in terms of being efficient against like lower caliber teams. I mean, you look at his shot selection, you look at his stats, like he averages gaudy numbers, but they aren't the most like on the best percentages. So yeah, I'm with you. I think you throw the defensive player of the year in all of America on him, and without any other real shot creators, you can maybe make a case for Giroux or Sasser, but not consistently. I think it's going to be really difficult, and Baylor has the guards anyway to keep up. All right, now moving into the Final Four. We're breaking it down. We've kind of alluded to it a little bit, but we're going to go over both games here. We're going to pick our winner, our X factor, our key matchup, and our keys to the game. So we'll start on with the later game. You know, there's no real game I can look at and say the blockbuster game, which is kind of disappointing, right? But Gonzaga and UCLA with the name brands, we can go with that. So, Ryan.
It's a rematch of the Adam Morrison crying game.
The game where they blew a huge lead. That was the year Adam Morrison almost won National Player of the Year, too, but my man J.J. Redick had him beat out rightfully. So sorry, Ryan. Sorry, I'm a big J.J. guy. But if you see me play, I make 1-3 and I act like him. Unwarrantedly. But regardless, we got this rematch of this, I think, 2006 tournament game 15 years ago in the Final Four. Gonzaga looking for the ultimate revenge. I think they're going to get it. We talked about this. There's nobody on UCLA's team that I think can stop Timme. And if they even so much as try to double Timme, the passing ability he has, the versatility of the starting lineup, the scoring from every position in the starting 5, I think there's really no way UCLA can keep them at bay enough to win this game.
Yeah, I jokingly believe the X factor here to be the referees. UCLA's only chance is if the refs foul out Gonzaga's entire team.
Yeah, I mean, the way you beat Gonzaga is you get Suggs and or Timme in foul trouble.
And even that might still not be enough because they still have Kispert.
And they got Nembhard coming off the bench.
Nembhard too. Like they just have Gonzaga. The problem for UCLA is Gonzaga has so many different weapons that it's hard for opposing teams to have a player that can guard all of Gonzaga's weapons.
Absolutely.
I believe Gonzaga's going to have a mismatch, maybe two mismatches as far as guarding as far as UCLA, who they are matching up with. And that just creates a lot of problems for UCLA as defensively trying to stop that when, especially due to UCLA's size issues, there are going to be some mismatches all over the court that Gonzaga will be able to exploit at will.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing we have to talk about is, look, we give UCLA credit for keeping up with Bama. Bama's offense is phenomenal. But the best offense in the country is the team they're about to play. And it's the best offense in the country that has been clicking at a higher level than it has arguably all season. I don't see any way UCLA can keep Gonzaga under 80, and that's the only shot they have of winning this game.
No, there's not. Gonzaga is the best offensive team in the country in large part because they are the best passing team I have ever seen. You watch Gonzaga, watch the ball move when Gonzaga plays. It is absolutely beautiful. They make bounce passes in transition look effortless, and I can tell you those passes are actually kind of difficult. It is not, those leading bounce passes in transition are not super easy, and Gonzaga makes them look that way. They're the best passing team by a mile.
And it's fueled by arguably the best passer in college basketball in Jalen Suggs. I mean, yeah. We talk about how good Jalen Suggs is, and people will look at his numbers and be like, oh, he doesn't fill it up like Cunningham does. I think Cunningham's a better player personally. I know there's debate out on that, and the jury's out on that. But Jalen Suggs, he's so well-rounded, and in transition, when Gonzaga looks to attack, those passes he makes, as you've talked about, are incredible. Even in the normal flow of the offense, the vision Jalen Suggs has, both on and off the ball, is incredible. The intelligent cutting ability of the likes of Kispert, Suggs, Watson even had a few good cuts, despite the fact that my man can't make an open layup. But, like, all these guys know exactly what they're doing. And then you throw Timmy in there, a center who is an unbelievable passer. I just don't see any way they can get slowed down in this particular game.
The other problem UCLA is going to have, and anybody playing Gonzaga has, is defensive rotations, because if you watch the normal flow of Gonzaga's half-court offense, that ball, watch how fast it's moving. And they're basically playing hot potato with that ball, moving it around, looking to get the best shot. And by the time someone closes out on one guy, the ball's 2 passes away now. Like, it is crazy how just efficient and fast Gonzaga has that ball moving.
Absolutely. And they've solved their turnover problems largely for the most part, too. Throughout the year, especially in the dog days of WCC play, yes, they won every game, obviously. But you would see games where they turn it over a bit, keep the opponents in the game. That hasn't really happened. It happened a little bit against Creighton, but it didn't matter. And they cleaned it up really well against USC. I think that when you throw a guy like Nembhard as well to come off the bench and play starters minutes alongside Suggs and even in place of Suggs when Suggs goes to the bench, and Suggs cleaning up his turnover issues, there just really isn't a lot of things you can hang your hat on in trying to stop them. And this kind of brings us into the discussion of the X factor, Ryan, because ultimately the X factor is probably going to come on UCLA's side just because of how consistent Gonzaga has been. Maybe you make a case for Anton Watson, but I don't think it's like a big enough deal. For me, my X factor for them is Johnny Juzang, because he's going to be matched up probably with Corey Kispert. And we know Juzang's a great defender, but can he follow Kispert around the perimeter, catch the backdoor cuts before they happen, and just stay locked on him? Because Corey Kispert has been playing for 4 years. He knows exactly what he's doing every game. He's so intelligent both on and off the ball. Phenomenal shooter. He's going to stretch Juzang out. Not that that's too much of an issue for him. Can Juzang take Kispert out of the game and make this more of a 2-man offense for Gonzaga? And that's put very lightly, because you have a Yai, you have Nembhard, you have other guys who can score points. But in terms of the 3 stars, you need to take Corey Kispert out, minimize the range, clamp the defense a bit more, and give Gonzaga a harder time driving. And if Juzang isn't able to clamp Kispert, I think that's just out the window.
Yeah, I agree that Johnny Juzang is the X factor here defensively. You touched on it following Kispert, but can they follow the ball as well and follow the passes? I alluded to how quickly Gonzaga has that ball going from person to person, and it makes it hard to rotate. So that's going to be a key. But I think Johnny Juzang on the offensive end is equally as big of an X factor for UCLA because let's face it, the only way you're really beating Gonzaga is scoring points. You're not going to beat Gonzaga scoring 51 points. They're going to need Johnny Juzang to have one of those legendary March performances that'll forever be remembered to keep this competitive. They're going to need look. They have Campbell, they have Cody Riley, they have Jaquez, but Juzang's by far been the most consistent, their most reliable. Not that that's saying a whole lot on this particular team, but they need Johnny Juzang to really be a big time scorer on Saturday.
Absolutely. I think with Jaquez defensively on Kispert, Juzang on offense, you'll need Jaquez to step up on offense as well. I think that that's a real key for us. And the other thing I want to touch on before we move into the other game, the earlier game, on offense, I think UCLA absolutely needs to get to the free throw line for more reasons than one, because practically speaking, you'll be getting the likes of maybe Suggs, Timmy, somebody on that red hot Gonzaga starting five in foul trouble. I think ultimately that's going to be the way you stay competitive and potentially beat them. And then also, you need to be able to get to the line to try to just get some points outside the normal flow of your offense, because Gonzaga's defense has stepped up a lot lately, like that's a lot. This defense was up and down coming into the tournament. It's been fully locked in the entire tournament. I think the only way they're going to be able to win this game is to get to the line a lot.
More than that, they have to make their free throws too. The free throw shooting this tournament has left a lot to be desired, and it has cost a lot of teams games. Free throw shooting has sent a lot of teams home earlier than they probably wanted to be going home. It is definitely decreased the population in the bubble, so the NCAA is happy about that. But we say get to the line, but what we really mean is get to the line and make your free throws. Don't miss. They're free. They're free. 100%. They're free.
No, you got to make them. You can't pull a Bama. You can't pull a Bama, because ultimately that's part of the reason why UCLA is even in this position in the first place.
Yes.
Bama couldn't make free throws.
Michigan too couldn't make a lot of free throws against UCLA.
Maybe they can curse Gonzaga to miss their free throws, but I'm not loving those odds.
I'm not banking on it.
All right. So moving into the earlier game, maybe the less marquee game.
I think it's the better game on paper. It may not have the brand of UCLA, but this is definitely the better game.
I agree with you, but in terms of marketability, we're gonna say
marketability. It's the old Southwest Conference. What could be more marketable than that?
Gonzaga UCLA.
Regardless,
this is a game that it's going to be a decent basketball game. I think it's going to be close. It's Baylor and Houston on the other side of the bracket here. Winner likely facing Gonzaga. So Ryan, for starters, who are you taking in this game?
I am taking Baylor. I think it will be close. I just don't think Houston has the offense to pull out a win. I don't think Houston has the big-time guy that, late in the game, you say, that's the guy I want with the ball in my hand 100 times out of 100 when we're down by 2 and we need a basket late. I'm not sure. Maybe Giroux, although he's been dealing with injuries. Maybe Sasser, although you just don't know. I just don't think they have that guy. I think that the X factor for me is definitely going to be, can Houston get some consistent scoring from a Quentin Grimes or someone else, maybe take some of that load away from Giroux and Sasser and kind of free up and kind of force Baylor to step out on defense a little bit more. That to me is going to be the X factor in this game.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that Baylor's going to win this basketball game, but it won't be as easy as people think. I think they're going to win it because Houston doesn't score the basketball enough, and they'll get rebounds, but maybe they won't convert it into enough second chance points. I think you brought up a good point in Baylor's kind of having a go-to guy over Houston as well. I want Jared Butler having the basketball, like objectively. Like if you're in a Lakers
1,000 times out of 1,000, I'd want that ball in Jared Butler's hands. Although if they could get it inside to like Vital for a layup, that'd be great too.
Well, and that's the thing about Butler is he's going to draw attention, and you have other guards on the perimeter, and you have a Vital in the 4 spot.
And Jared Butler, even when he's not scoring, he can make things happen.
Exactly.
Like, I'm not sure Houston has a guy that, like, even just without scoring can make things happen for other players on his team in that kind of situation.
100%, especially because their leading scorer is a guy who's pretty much just a guy like who monopolizes possession of the ball, in Grimes. So I think that I'm going to say Baylor for that reason, but also I just don't see Houston being efficient enough. I think Baylor's defense is, it's had lapses, but against a Houston team that isn't exactly known for its scoring, it can potentially afford to have a few more, at least in terms of guards. The big X factor for me, and the only way Houston stays in this game, as we talked about, is offensive rebounding. So I think the likes of Gresham and Gorham against Chuma Thachua and Thamba, by the way, I'm getting that pronunciation spot on, I think.
Yeah, that was nice. That was
I've watched enough Baylor games to know. But and I'm gonna find out I'm wrong tomorrow morning. But the thing I'm gonna say is like, look, Chuma Thachua and Thamba aren't known for the defensive glass. We talked about this tonight. We talked about this before. If you're Gresham and Gorham, you need to bully them. Like, because you know your guards are going to miss shots. You need to bully. I'm talking like out-rebound Baylor by 15.
The thing that Houston needs to do, when they see a shot go up, they just need to start running towards the basket. Try and get inside position. Try and get inside position. And then when you get inside position, basically the roles are reversed. Once you get inside position, then you as the offensive player do a little boxing out and then go after the ball. That's what Houston's going to have to do now. It's going to hurt them in transition defense, sure, but this is the only chance Houston has of winning this game because of their inability to score consistently from outside.
Absolutely. And it's going to look, if they can stay on the glass competitively, it's going to throw some wrenches for Baylor because, right, Baylor likes to play Vital as the 4. And then play Chuma Thachua or Thamba separately and stagger their minutes because it's better for pushing in transition, better for offensive sets, whatever. And Vital, to his credit, a great rebounder for his size, but he's short. Like he is short compared to these bigs. So if you're Houston and you throw Gorham and Gresham out there at the same time and they're winning the battle on the glass, it's going to put Baylor in a predicament because you might have to play 3 out, 2 in, or you're just going to have to deal with hemorrhaging rebounds. And that's a difficult position to be in. Do I think that it's enough? And do I think Baylor's going to exploit them in transition when they do get rebounds? Yes. And I think that's the difference for me. But if Houston can win these battles and maybe force some lineup changes, this is where things get interesting. All right, Ryan, the other thing we should talk about here in this game, we've kind of talked about keys to the game. We talked about key matchup X factor a little bit. Do you have another, before we change things, a different key matchup, specific matchup we're looking at here? And it could be in the guard spots because we talked a lot about forwards.
We touched a lot on it earlier with Quentin Grimes and likely Davion Mitchell. I think that's going to be the key because I've alluded to if Quentin Grimes can get things going and make things happen on offense, that'll be a huge boon to Houston. And it'll take some of the pressure off of, say, Sasser and Giroux. So I think that's going to be a big matchup to watch there. And also on the flip side, Davion Mitchell offensively, Baylor's got could be a very good thing for Baylor as well. So I think that's a big matchup. I don't really think this is not really a game though where I think there's just a particular matchup that you would say, oh, this is way more important than the rest.
Yeah, I think for me, it's more of a blended mix as well. We talked about the front court. I do think Grimes and Mitchell is going to be huge. Like, I think that objectively could decide the game potentially. I mean, look, Houston's going to have to be good on the glass for that matchup to really matter anyways. But look, if you are Quentin Grimes and you can somehow get numbers against the defensive player of the year in the nation, the national defensive player of the year, we're in business. The thing is, I don't think that's going to happen. I think that ultimately is the reason why Baylor wins this basketball game. And whatever the line is, I might take him to cover, honestly.
Mm-hmm. I have a women's Final Four update for all the lovely viewers out there who follow the amazing sport that is women's basketball. South Carolina missed a potential game-winning layup at the end, and Stanford wins by 1.
Wow. This women's tournament's been crazy. I mean,
It's been great.
You saw UConn, the way they beat Baylor. The non-existent foul call
I always say though, don't allow a 19 to run if you're Baylor, and that won't be a problem. So I don't think there was any robbery or whatever, but you know.
Fair enough. I mean, it's been a wild.
I was more focused on watching Kim Mulkey's hilarious post game video trying to the mascot all different ways.
You just know that that's how you identify a Texan these days, isn't it? like doesn't know how to wear a mask properly. Sorry, Joe. I'm sure look, this is because your state opened up the Rangers Stadium at full capacity when not enough of this country.
To be fair to the Rangers, I would wager they will not be the only one at full capacity by like August. Although Absolutely. That's a different thing. Although that's a different argument entirely, and I'm sidetracking, but yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I'm just trolling. I'm just trolling ultimately. Regardless, kind of moving now in from Sam's semi-Corona bro rant to the college basketball offseason, a far more interesting topic for you viewers out there. There's been a lot going down, and the transfer portal, aka Ryan's new Twitter name, aka the place people decide to just switch teams willy-nilly. I mean, it's going to be at 2021 pretty soon at this rate. Like Ryan made that joke multiple times on his Twitter and it's a good joke. And it's going wild. So Ryan, look, this prompts an intriguing question, because obviously the big deterrent for transferring is the 1 year you have to sit out, but ultimately, right,
not there anymore.
It's not there, and ultimately that isn't fair to guys who genuinely have bad situations at the school they're at and they want to leave, or like have other issues or grad transfer or whatever. But it seems like this is more of a free agency than we potentially ever seen in college sports.
Yeah,
and
I think this is the big issue that of can versus should. Perhaps can they have the freedom, or rather, can they have that freedom to transfer? Yes, but should they always be using it? No. And I don't have a problem with people who have legitimate reasons to transfer, but you can't. We're over at 111 or over 1,100 kids in the portal, and you cannot convince me that none of those 1,100 kids are in there because I wasn't getting my playing time. I want to go somewhere where I can actually play. It's too hard for me here. Oh, this is too difficult. Oh, get me closer. I need to go. I'm going to play more here. You can't convince me that none of those 1,100 kids are in there for reasons where, they just can't handle adversity. And the other thing about the transfer portal to me, and when I see people say, well, any other student completing their degree can transfer, yeah, but you don't see normal students typically transferring every single year to a different school the way you see some of these college basketball players. I swear they're going from Georgia Community College 1 year, Georgia State the next, Georgia Tech the next, and then they finish their career at Georgia or something. It's a new school every single year. The big problem with me is the multiple time transfers. What?
Yeah. I mean, here, okay, I'm going to push back on one point you made. I actually do think it's perfectly legitimate. It is one thing, right? If you've been in a system for a year and you're a freshman and you come in and you're you don't get played, so you say, screw it, I'm transferring. That's one thing. Like that is a little more suspicious to me. But if you've been in a system for multiple years and it just doesn't look like you're going to get to play at all, they bring in 5 stars, there's really no path for you to play basketball. I understand the desire to move. Do I agree with you with multiple time transfers? Absolutely. And the big problem for me about the transfer portal in general, like it's not about the playing time argument. I actually find a little more legitimate as long as you're not doing it at every school you move to. But the bigger thing for me is Texas Tech. It's the perfect example. Kyler Edwards, Marco Santos Silva, they're both in the portal.
But
Why
that's legit because their coach left.
Yeah, but that's actually my thing here for this. It's one thing if you're like, I really was attracted here to this specific coach, and as a result, I don't feel at home, and the only reason I want to go here was that. But if you're leaving because you just don't foresee your team being competitive, that's the question I'm posing. Because I'm telling you right now, Marco Santos Silva, I don't know if he was that attracted to Chris Beard, where he's like, you know what, I'm going to leave VCU, a good program with a great head coach that's a tournament contender every year, for Texas Tech just because of the coach. No, I think it's the step up in competitiveness. It's the ability for that team to be more guaranteed a tournament team on paper. And so for me, I don't have as much of an issue with playing time as long as you're not coming in 1 year, not playing that 1 year, and then transferring. My issue specifically is the fact that some of these guys, yeah, sure, maybe it was the coach, but sometimes I genuinely think they are just jumping ship because they don't think that they can compete there. And in that case, it's like you picked that school, you committed to that school. And if you're not going to stay because because you simply just don't think you can compete and that your skills alone will allow you to compete, that's my issue. It's more of that for me seems like a Kevin Durant to the Warriors situation.
Yeah, I also agree with that. And I think the other big thing, though, is I think this Texas Tech is a unique case because not only did Chris Beard leave, he left to Texas. And so I think that's a whole nother discussion. But I look at Chris Beard's coaching career, and this touches on another issue that's kind of related to the transfer portal. I see coaches yipping and yapping about loyalty all the time, Chris Beard among them. Chris Beard's coaching career, he was at Angelo State for a year, McMurray for 2 seasons, Little Rock for 1 year, UNLV for less than 2 weeks, Texas Tech for 5 years. Where's the loyalty in that? Like, my big problem, I think, with this whole situation is that coaches are hypocrites. And I think will be the only way really to get this transfer portal under control is for coaches to stop leaving every other year.
100%. I think that definitely sets the precedent for a player to basically say, hey, like my coach just left. He clearly doesn't have the loyalty to this program. Why should I? And I think that that's a great point. I mean, because we're talking about the issue I brought up here with players leaving just because of competitiveness and an upgrade in competitiveness. Coaches do the same stuff. And I think that's a great point you make, Ryan. And I think ultimately when you have a coach that's supposed to be a mentor and someone who leads by example, I think that that's the best way you rectify things. And it's harder too in that sense because they're professionals, they're paid professionals. And
but student athletes should be paid.
I fully agree with you. Speaking of which, if the Supreme Court doesn't let these guys be paid, the Supreme Court should be
fired. And the Supreme Court humiliated the NCAA. I'm pretty sure I know which way they're leaning on that. Perfect. It was pretty funny to watch because the NCAA lawyer just got his you-know-what kicked.
And here, hey, look, I'd hate to be that NCAA lawyer because you were arguing maybe the crappiest case on planet Earth. I've written papers on this. Ryan and I have talked about this, and this is
I've written papers on it too.
Yeah, I mean, we both are pretty informed on this subject. Look, you're not paying them, and then you say you can't make money off your name. Are you dumb? Like, if you're a lawyer and you have to argue that point, what am I going to sit here and say? Amateurism? It's not amateurism when you bring in $1 billion. So
I got an NBA score people might want to hear. Raptors 99, Warriors 49 in the third quarter.
I think Steph's out.
That would be the case.
He has a tailbone injury.
That has to be the case.
Well,
Woo!
that seems like the score of us of us versus NCAA. Pay the kids. Um,
Yeah. The Supreme Court just went after him. Oh my lord.
and the NCAA clearly down bad. Speaking of down bad, the UNC basketball program lost their coach this week. Roy Williams retires. I love that segue. My God.
That was
Roy
pretty
Williams.
good.
Roy Williams retires here, and it's look. UNC's got a really interesting situation. Ryan alluded to it at the top of the show. Some potential replacements being mentioned, but Ryan, I'm interested here. So the big thing here. How do you think UNC is going to stack up with a new coach next year? We already talked about UNC could potentially struggle in the ACC, and then follow up. Who is the best man for the job? Best man or woman for the job? I should
Going to
say.
start with the second and then come back. The best candidate, in my opinion, is Wes Miller, the coach at UNC Greensboro. He played for Roy Williams, an absolute legend, by the way. 903 career wins, 9 Final Fours between Kansas and North Carolina. Sounds like an all-around great dude. So props to Roy Williams on one of the best coaching careers that college basketball will ever see. But yeah, no, I mean, you look at North Carolina the last 2 years, they haven't been their typical championship contending, team that you'd expect out of North Carolina. And now they have a coaching transition, and this could create some difficulties, although I think they're good. Whoever it is that they hire will be a very capable head coach, I am sure. And I don't know. I don't think it'll take them long to get North Carolina back in the running in the ACC. I think the ACC is in trouble because Roy Williams just retired. He's 70. Krzyzewski's over 70. Leonard Hamilton is over 70. I think Larinaga's over 70. Jim Boeheim's over 70. All those guys are going to be out of the league pretty soon. So just what we have coming in the Atlantic Coast Conference.
And one of those spots will hopefully be filled by my man Sorna Donishvar Jr., future coach. But that's not a joke. My man knows his stuff. That's not a joke. My man knows his stuff.
Does he like to play a little matchup zone defense and a?
I don't think he's a big zone guy. I don't know. I don't
Good.
know.
I'm not a big zone guy either.
Yeah.
Get along fantastic.
Sorna, I think I found you an assistant. But by the flag football team did not go well. But anyway, we got to talk about this. I want to ask you about Hubert Davis. Obviously, a longtime assistant of Roy Williams. Why don't you like him for that job?
Well, and it isn't just me. The UNC athletic director, Bubba Cunningham, actually really hinted that he would prefer to hire a head coach, a guy with head coaching experience. And I'm not sure. And I think that's the best way to go for a school like North Carolina. Hubert Davis is a head coach. I mean, I'm flashing back to when I was 8 or 9 years old. Hubert Davis used to be on ESPN's College Game Day with Bob Knight and Digger Phelps. And I'm going back to them being like, hey, 8-year-old me, Hubert Davis, head coach North Carolina in 20 years. And 8-year-old in 10 years, a little over 10 years, 8-year-old me would laugh me out of the house. No way. And I still look, Hubert Davis is a very valuable assistant coach. I'm not saying he isn't. I'm skeptical that he's head coach material.
Fair enough. And I guess the last thing I want to ask is, regardless of who this new head coach is, how are they stacking up in the ACC?
I mean, they're North Carolina, and their name alone will always attract recruits. So I think they'll always stack up fairly well in the ACC. Will they compete for championship, a national title? Maybe not next year, maybe not even the year after that. It could take a couple years to get back to that level. And they still have to deal with Duke, Virginia, Florida State, Georgia Tech. A lot. I'm hearing some interesting things about players returning for another year at Georgia Tech. I'm hearing about Alvarado and Jordan Usher. So Georgia Tech could be running it back next year. So keep an eye out for that. But yeah, I think they'll be definitely up there. But I think they have a little ways to go to get back to their normal kind of standard of excellence.
Fair enough. And then kind of transitioning now, we've alluded to this throughout the show, the big one. Roy Williams retiring is probably the big one. But the big kind of switch. So obviously Shaka Smart plans his exit strategy. Ryan alluded to that a few weeks ago. He goes to Marquette. Chris Beard is the new coach at Texas, moves from Texas Tech. Beard obviously went to Texas. So he's coaching now his alma mater.
Shouldn't have taken the Texas Tech job in the first place, is what I'll say.
I think he did. I think he did a good. Bringing him to a national title.
Look, he did a good job, but he went to Texas. He has to know he's going to be taking the Texas job eventually if it came open. So, look, there's a reason that not many, you don't see Virginia alums take the Virginia Tech job very often. You don't, I think this is a dirty move by Chris Beard. It's a sellout. He's a traitor now in Texas Tech. There will be objects thrown on the court very likely when Texas goes to Lubbock next year. It's a great hire for Texas. But, yeah, I think he did Texas Tech pretty wrong. I think I'm not sure he should have taken that job.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on this one. Look, I understand coaches want to coach at the best possible location for them. It's a dream to coach your alma mater, but to go directly from a in-state Big 12 rival that they play twice a year to Texas, and you leave a program that you've built for the last 5 years,
he should have just stayed. I know he should have just stayed at UNLV and then waited for the Texas job to open that way. I'm sure he could have done an amazing job at UNLV too. He should have just stayed at UNLV instead of taking the job at his alma mater's rival when, he knew it was a possibility he'd get the job at his alma mater. This just seems like a dirty move to Texas Tech.
I agree with you. And I guess the last thing we have to talk about is obviously Shaka Smart's out the door. Ramey, Jones, I think Coleman is also a senior. And then you have Kai Jones probably declaring for the NBA draft along with Greg Brown. This team's going to get gutted. So, Ryan, I want to know how you think in comparison to the Shaka Smart Texas team, Chris Beard is going to fare in his early time at Texas.
I think Chris Beard, they're going to struggle next year. Remember, it's worth noting Chris Beard kind of struggled his first year at that other place at Texas Tech too. Yeah, they're going to be gutted. It'll be very interesting to see how many of those Texas Tech players in the transfer portal actually follow Chris Beard to Texas. Because whatever you want to say about the move, I have heard that his players really genuinely like him and respect him a lot. So I certainly think that is a possibility that Kyler Edwards or some of them follow him to Texas. And that would change things a lot. The other thing is that the Big 12 now, the Texas-Oklahoma football games are probably going to have more points than the basketball games because Oklahoma is getting a defensive-minded coach of their own in Loyola Chicago's Porter Moser. No, Sister Jean did not come as part of the package deal. She remains at Loyola Chicago, where hopefully they can find a coach to continue the run they've been on. But Oklahoma with a great get in Porter Moser.
And speaking, that's a perfect segue to what our final topic of the night is. Moser goes to Oklahoma, announced about 3 hours ago. And speaking of doing teams dirty, Porter Moser in the locker room, I think pre-Sweet 16, if I'm not mistaken, told his players, "I'm not leaving." They lose, and he leaves.
Yeah.
I understand wanting to step up. It's a phenomenal program.
This is not the first time we've seen that with a mid-major coach doing that, though, and it won't be the last. If true, I don't think I saw that, but if true, it is definitely dirty. And I mean, we need to start holding these coaches accountable for pulling crap like that, though.
To be fair, I think I saw it on Twitter. I'm not fully sure. I'm not sure it's fully verified, but from what I heard last week, it did not sound like he was leaving in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, no, and yeah, so we need to hold coaches accountable for this because they're supposed to be like molders of young men. What are you teaching young men when you say, "I'm not leaving, I'm committed, I'm loyal," and then 1 week later you're out the door for the first better job that comes for the first sign of more prosperity or whatever, or a better deal than what you currently have? What is that teaching them? That's not teaching them how to deal with adversity or whatever, that's for sure.
And I also want to recognize I could be conflating this with Brad Stevens saying he's not going to Indiana, which
Yes.
again is a thing, but I'm pretty sure Moser said something along those lines. But also, we talk about, speaking of Indiana, we talk about kind of Loyola and Porter Moser leaving. And look, I think that
Mike Woodson was a terrible hire.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to bring up because Trace Jackson Davis is staying. He believes in Coach Mike Woodson, but he's an assistant coach for the Knicks at age 60.
Yes, but they've had, and also Mike Woodson has zero college experience. Being a college head coach is more than just the basketball; it's the recruiting component too. And Mike Woodson's never been involved in that. And by the way, Trace Jackson Davis, it is a huge win, but he's been in Indiana for the last couple of years and he hasn't done much. So like, let's not make this out to be like this is a guarantee that Indiana's going dancing next year, because it might just be a guarantee that Indiana finishes with more than 5 wins. Like, they've been horrible. I mean, absolutely terrible the last few years. Like, it was no wonder Bob Knight wanted to stay away for so long. They've been terrible.
Yeah, and absolutely collapsed. Like, at the end, towards the last 2 months of this season, when they were on the bubble in January, they fully collapsed. Trace Jackson Davis, phenomenal player, great on the glass, but they don't have a lot outside him, and also the man can't shoot consistently.
Yeah, and I'm just not sure Mike Woodson. He's 68. I mean, leading a college program, especially your alma mater, it's a stressful job. I mean, there's a lot of pressure. Indiana fans are starving for anything that even remotely resembles the Bob Knight glory days without, the chair throwing and the player choking, I'm sure. And I'm just not sure Mike Woodson's the guy that can deliver. Although I agree Indiana fans need to know that it's going to take a little bit of time to get back to glory days. Mike Woodson's not the guy to do it.
And here's the thing. We talk about this with Texas fans, Texas football fans, but Indiana basketball fans, they are so used to glory days. They think about that. They need to have patience with Woodson. Well, look, do I think Woodson is a good hire? Maybe not the best. But if you're hiring a new coach, and with the roster they have and the way they've been performing the last 3-4 years, I think you need to give them more than
the key thing for Mike Woodson here that'll make me reevaluate this is he needs to hire a great staff with lots of recruiting experience. That's what could save this hire. If Mike Woodson can assemble an amazing staff, a coaching staff that is, that's the key. And I think but I also think Texas football, and you and I have spoken about this before, Indiana basketball at least has, multiple national championships, within the last 50 years. And they were in the national championship game as recently as 2002. You and I have spoken about this. Texas football fans were spoiled by the Mac Brown era.
100%.
Think about it. Take Mac Brown away from Texas. They're Virginia. They're Purdue, with maybe slightly cooler uniforms.
Yeah, and also, think about it this way, right? You look at Indiana. They haven't had even the slightest taste of success since 2013.
They were a one seed
loss in the Sweet 16. And so I don't think this Indiana program, at least recently, has been the most decorated. Look, it's
been a lot like Texas football.
Yeah, it's got the titles from the Bob Knight era. But if you're an Indiana fan, you can't expect Woodson to just walk right in and fix everything at the drop of a hat, especially because this Indiana job, was not attractive. Like there were people turning this job down left and right. People were not.
There's a reason Brad Stevens didn't want this job.
It's a nightmare. You have coaches that expect you to succeed on a year-to-year basis, and you don't have the players to do it, at least as of this current moment. And Indiana does not look. They got Romeo Langford, but outside of that, hasn't really had the recruiting pull some other historic blue bloods have. Even I think UCLA's done better in terms of getting guys in the transfer portal in Juzang, and then obviously picking up Jaquez and building teams like that. I think that ultimately this Indiana job doesn't have it has the financial resources, but doesn't actually have the personnel resources for success at this current moment. So I worry about the ability to hire a great assistant coach, because look, maybe you're sitting there thinking, oh, well, if Woodson fails, I'll be the next guy. Or maybe if Woodson succeeds when he retires in 10 years, I'll be his successor. But I don't know. Like, if I'm an assistant looking to move up, I want to be on a successful staff. And I don't think that Indiana is going to be that successful staff.
Yeah, I don't either.
All right, that kind of hits our agenda for the night. Ryan, any last minute college basketball topics we should discuss before we call it?
I think we hit the big ones.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We got some great viewership tonight, consistently around the 5 to 6 range. So I called it spot on tonight, Ryan. We got the elevated viewership. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Stick with us. We're gonna have Ryan back to recap the national championship next week. He's our college basketball guy. This man is locked in on college basketball and college football, so you'll be seeing more of him soon. We'll have Joe back next week as well. He's literally just driving home from Louisiana. Men's taking a journey at the moment.
Probably doing some illicit activities in Louisiana, by the way. We don't like to speculate on this show, but
it's Joe Kane. I don't think he does anything illegal. But anyway, we will have us all back next week. Stick with us on the Gold Mine. Check our channel for highlights. Follow us on @thegoldminewalt on pretty much every platform. Follow Ryan on EISNER_Ryan on Twitter. His name is the Transfer Portal. And then your Instagram is at Ryan.Eisner.
Yes, that's correct.